Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
If you look east towards the eastern coast of India, the southeastern coast, it would look like this is the season of white papers. So in Andhra Pradesh, the new government of Chandrababu Naidu, the TDP government, Telugu Desam Party government, they've been releasing white papers on their predecessors, that is YSRCP government of Jagan Mohan Reddy. Similarly, in Telangana, the sister state, or let's say the sibling state of Andhra Pradesh, the state government there, the Congress state government, last year, towards the end of 2023, released a white paper on their predecessors. That is K. Chandrasekhar Rao's TRS or BRS government. In each case, the claim in these white papers is with data that the previous government indulged in financial profligacy and left the state bankrupt. Now, in Andhra Pradesh, there have been 7 white papers. The 7th has just been issued now. There was one more that we spoke about earlier in a full episode of Cut The Clutter. That was on the power situation, the power crisis in the state. This one is about the overall finances. If you see this, overall finances look quite dire. Of course, large part of the white paper also is claims on what Chandrababu Naidu's government had done when they were in power between 2014 and 19. I will discount most of that now because that's a question of claims, and the fact is that despite that performance, Chandrababu Naidu did lose power in 2019 and did lose power quite as dramatically as now he has won power, quite as dramatically as Jagan has lost power now. So Andhra Pradesh is a state that gives this drastic sweeping verdicts one way or the other, where the loser also gets about 40% of the vote. So this is that kind of a polarized state, polarized in terms of local politics. So I will not go into the claims over the previous 5 years when TDP was in power, but look at the situation that the TDP or Chandrababu Naidu inherited now after 5 years of Jagan. Of course, Jagan has reacted to this white paper and he has said that under Chandrababu Naidu, Andhra Pradesh is going backwards. It's gone in reverse. So this will go on even with the power white paper. YSRCP had said that this was a sham and a pack of lies. Now, while this white paper has been issued, almost coinciding with this, Telangana has also released its budget. It's the first budget. They had taken a vote on account earlier. This is also an interesting budget because while they had issued a white paper earlier last year, this budget also is in the nature of a step forward or maybe another chapter in that same white paper, because this tells you the state of finances in Telangana. Now, I might have an editorial view or maybe some bit of analysis as to why these states are running up these huge debts and huge deficits, but I will keep that for the very end. Right now, what is the situation? If you look at Telangana, the Telangana budget, in fact, Telangana budget, while the government there is excoriating their predecessors for being populist, for being spraying too much money around, they've started their own innings also with this sweeping loan waiver amounting to 31,000 crores for smaller farmers, and they're giving it out very quickly in quick installments. They in fact accuse their predecessors of having taken too long delivering on their own promises on loan waiver. So my loan waiver is faster than your loan waiver. That seems to be the claim. It is not so much about I am less populist than you. In fact, is it impossible to sustain these loan waivers and these populist measures? The finance minister of Telangana, that is Bhatti Vikramarka Mallu, he started his budget speech with a quote from Nelson Mandela, and the quote is, "It always seems impossible unless it's done." So he's done. He says what looked like impossible. So in his case, this is almost like a khata-khat delivery. The government has come to power and they have kept the promise of a loan waiver. So he also invokes Rahul Gandhi in his budget speech, probably the first budget speech. Our political editor DK Singh tells me probably the first budget speech in which Rahul Gandhi is mentioned, and he says this was Rahul Gandhi's promise in the Warangal declaration, and we are keeping this promise. This is the loan mafia. However, the important thing is the reason we are linking it to the release of the Andhra Pradesh white paper on the state's finances is that these two were one state 10 years ago. They then broke up, became different states. Both the states went under local regional parties and have so far, barring the past few months in Telangana, where the Congress has ruled, it has generally been under local regional parties. And both states seem to be in quite a bad state when it comes to their finances. So Telangana first, because the budget came out, and then I will come to the Andhra white paper on state finances. So the budget of Telangana tells us that the debt of the state has gone up to 6,71,000 crores. That's when the GSDP of the state is just over 15 lakh crores, right? So it's almost more than 40% of your GSDP is already the state's own debt. That much. That wasn't the case earlier. It has become much worse now. It says the state's own revenue is 1,38,000 crores. In fact, 1,38,181 crores. Its non-tax revenue is 35,200 crores. Its devolved taxes, that's the share of taxes that the state gets from the center. It's part of GST, etc. That is 2,600 and 216 crores. With all this, the state says its fiscal deficit for the year is going to be almost 50,000 crores, precisely 49,255 crores. That will be about 3.4% of the state's GDP. That's a lot. That's a lot for a state which actually inherited the creamier part of the combined state of Andhra Pradesh, because they got a larger share of the revenues, a lower share of the population, also a much larger share of the more lucrative services economy. Where do we get that data from? Some of that data comes from the white paper that Chandrababu Naidu's government has released on the finances, state's finances in the state. This is the seventh white paper. Now, this white paper tells us that at the time of the state's bifurcation, there was obviously they claim there was uneven allocation of public finances. People of Andhra Pradesh did not want this bifurcation, but all that is so much watered down, the Godavari and Krishna, so there's no point arguing over that. But they show with data the disparities in economic resources that the two resultant states from the bifurcation got, and also liabilities. If you see, for example, the population, Andhra Pradesh had 58% of the population of the combined state. So 58% of the population came out in Andhra Pradesh, but they got only 46% of the revenue. So revenues were lower. That would mean that the state would expect that the center or somewhere, but obviously it had to be the center, will compensate them for this loss of revenue. Telangana, on the other hand, had 42% of the population and 54% of the revenue. So Telangana did better according to this. I'm sure Telangana has its own arguments, and one of those arguments would have been that we never stopped Andhra Pradesh from building its own capital and its own city and its own engines of growth. And also, while we may have got Hyderabad, Telangana got a coastline, because with the division of the state, Telangana was reduced to a landlocked state, whereas Andhra Pradesh had the entire coastline along the Bay of Bengal. The coastline is a very lucrative proposition, provided you are willing to make use of it, you are willing to develop it, build commerce around it, build your ports, bring in industry there. Not enough of that has happened in Andhra Pradesh, although we've seen growth around Visakhapatnam and also Kakinada to some extent, but it hasn't happened adequately. Again, see the comparison of per capita income, the combined Andhra, and then each unit that split out of combined Andhra. All of these graphics you will see on your screen. I'm taking them from the Andhra white paper, and I'm only taking those where data is verified. So Andhra Pradesh had a common per capita income of 95,185 rupees when the division took place. In the divided states, in the new states, Andhra Pradesh ended up with 93,903. That is lower than the average of the entire state. That's because Telangana had a much higher average. That was 1,24,000. You might be also interested in knowing what's happened subsequently. That's a very important point. Subsequently, Telangana has now become, by way of per capita incomes, among our major states, so we are leaving out Delhi, Chandigarh, etc., among our major states, that is, states with population above at least 1 crore. Telangana has now become the richest state in India by way of per capita income of 3.08 lakh per person per year, right? Karnataka is the second, is a close second with 3 lakh 1,000, 3.01. And again, you want me to go into more detail. Haryana is the third with 2.96 lakhs. Where is Andhra Pradesh? The gap between Andhra Pradesh and Telangana has increased. Andhra Pradesh is now 2 lakh 19,000, that is 2.19 lakhs, and seventh in the country. So Andhra Pradesh is also a story of under-leveraged potential, particularly given its coastline and given its very rich agriculture and plentiful availability of water from its rivers. But we also know that its premier water resources plan, that is the Polavaram project, that's got held up. That is something that we'll come to as we go along. Now see sector-wise share in GSTP, the state GDP, the sector-wise share. And again, Andhra's point is that the more lucrative sectors of the economy went to Telangana, we were left with the less lucrative. For example, what is less lucrative? Agriculture is less lucrative. So Andhra Pradesh, that emerged from the combined entity, it ended up with 33% agriculture. So 33% of its economy was now agricultural of the new states. Only 19% of Telangana's economy was agricultural, because we can see that Telangana was much more urbanized, particularly because Hyderabad and the extensions around Hyderabad were all there. Again, if you see industry, that's where Andhra did a little bit better than Telangana, probably because it had Vizag, it had Vijayawada, and it had couple of other places which had some older industry as well. So it had 23%, but gap wasn't too much. Telangana had 19%. Services, that's where the difference is. Services, Telangana got 61%. 61% of Telangana's economy was now services, whereas for Andhra, it was only 44%. So that is the complaint that Andhra Pradesh has in this white paper with the division of the state. Now, this is something which I suspect will have quite a bit of bipartisan agreement. This is something that even Jagan's party would say, that they were denied these advantages as they came out of Andhra Pradesh, as the state was divided. But then you see the claims, and these are now claims of the Naidu government in this white paper. The Naidu government claims that in their 5 years, agriculture was growing at 16% and services at 11.9%. Whereas in the 5 years of Jagan, it came down to agricultural growth came down to 10.3% from 16%, and services down, not by that much, but still down to 9.9%. Overall decline in the growth rate, they claim, you can see this graphic, it's from the white paper. Overall decline in growth was from 13.5% to 10.5%. And then they say that this decline had its consequences on states' revenues, on the state's taxes, on the investment situation in the state, etc., and also in per capita incomes of the state. They've given a list of what they claim are the examples of misgovernance. I'm sure Jagan and his party will have answers to that. I'm skipping that, except a couple of things are important there, because the most important areas where they claim that the state suffered was in the cancellation of contracts for building the new capital, Amravati, that we've spoken to you about several times before, Polavaram, the dam, and also, quote unquote, the alleged mismanagement of the energy sector. That was the subject of another white paper that we spoke about earlier. In the process, they claim that Andhra Pradesh's brand image also got damaged. The white paper has a graphic like a flow chart that tells you of the losses of the decisions taken. For example, they say 227 land allottees were withdrawn, neglect of Polavaram, Amravati roads, etc. And they say As a consequence, the per capita income growth came down from 13.2% to 9.5%, and the per capita debt increased from 74,790 rupees to 1,44,336 rupees. That's almost like doubling of the debt. Of course, you have to then mark it up for inflation and arrive at constant values. That's a bit complicated, but we can keep it at the back of our minds. The next important claim that the white paper makes is that the Jagan government, they laid great store by direct benefit transfer schemes. That's something we've covered in the past. Our reporters have covered in the past that some of these schemes looked quite effective because benefits reached the people of the state directly, and it did not look like there was too much leakage, looked like the schools were doing better until the statement so broke that the teachers and the school staff were struggling to get their salaries and dues. That is also something that the white paper takes notice of now. But the fact is that the claim in the white paper is that while you might have said that DBT, direct benefit transfer, will put money in people's hands, but the fact is that people's incomes, that is per capita incomes in the state, the growth rate of those incomes has gone down. I just told you the difference from 13.2% in the preceding 5 years to now 9.5%. See this graphic from the white paper on your screens. It sounds a bit complicated, so I'll let it be on your screen as I talk. What this is telling you, this is not telling you a story of theft. This is telling you a story of a sleight of hand. A sleight of hand, again, Milo minder bender. I do business with myself. I take money from one pocket, put it in the other. In the process, I say I make a profit or something like that. So in this case, they say the government took deposits from its own corporations, societies, even universities, and then further deposited them in the Andhra Pradesh State Financial Services, which is a non-banking finance company owned by the state. This company in turn lent these to Andhra Pradesh State Development Corporation, which in turn lent this to Government of Andhra Pradesh, which was then spending this money on all its schemes, etc., while revenues were not going up. So this money was coming indirectly to the state government for spending. Implication is not that anybody was stealing this money. Implication was the state government was spending the money it had not earned. And how did it then repay its debt or repay whatever it could of its debt? That was done by increasing taxes and by increasing prices of utilities, etc. for the citizens. That's an allegation in the white paper. I'm in no position to substantiate it, and I'm sure Jagan's party will have their own answers to this. The white paper also has a list of government organizations from which deposits were taken and given away to this Andhra Pradesh Finance Corporation. See that list on your screen. At least the data is available. Once data is available, we can argue over it whether it's right or wrong. Then diversion of taxes through Andhra Pradesh State Beverages Limited, that is APS BCL, that had come up even when we spoke about the power sector earlier in Andhra Pradesh State Development Corporation. So what this white paper says is that the states from liquor sales, states VAT incomes, they were diverted a special margin to APS BCL, which is the state's own beverages corporation, basically alcohol corporation, which with this margin money, I presume, could raise more debt. That was then given to government of Andhra Pradesh for spending. Similarly, the additional retail excise tax levied on liquor, that was directly transferred. That was 14,275 crores. That was directly transferred to Andhra Pradesh State Development Corporation, which in turn gave it to state government to spend. The amount of VAT given to APS BCL, that is the Beverages Limited, that was 20,676 crores. So basically, these were the revenues the government got, right? Government gave it away to these corporations, which could also raise more money because they now got more margin money, and that money was then given to state government for spending. If you see this graphic, this chart, the flow chart that the white paper gives, you see the line at the bottom. It says sacrificing future revenue of 15 years by diverting ARET, I would presume what this means is securitizing this as margin money and borrowing from the future so that you would consume the future revenues to repay this debt. Now see this picture from the white paper. These are pictures of some of the properties which the state government mortgaged in these 5 years to pay its bills. That is 1941 crore worth of mortgages to banks. Now that is not something that's unique to Andhra Pradesh. Many state governments have done it. I know that Punjab did it in the past. I don't know if they still do it, but many other state governments have done it. A lot of our state governments are quite broke, and that's why they keep on doing stuff like this. Again, see the next chart that tells you the government also took away local body funds and employees' savings. And these were directly or indirectly consumed in government expenses. That is how liabilities have now got accumulated from Andhra Pradesh government to local bodies, that is municipal corporations, etc. I would believe, and also distribution companies for power, they are paid from local bodies towards spending electricity charges for the government. This comes to 5,308 crores, and the white paper claims that the employees' savings diverted through this circuitous route to fund government spending are 5,243 crore. The next chart is simple to understand. This tells you the rising gap between the state's revenues and the state's spending. As we stand, it's about 30%. Revenues are 1,40,000 crores. Costs are 2 lakh crores. It's high, but I would suspect that most states of this size will not be doing much better than this because most of our states are deep in debt. Which brings us to the most important question, the D question, the debt question. Now, debt is what can kill anybody. It can kill an individual, it can kill a family, it can kill a company, it can kill a country, it can kill a state as well. The problem with the country and the state is the companies that think like that go into deep trouble. See Zimbabwe, for example, that's one example, right? Or the countries then see high inflation, high interest rates, and high borrowings. Mostly countries pay for their debt through borrowing, as do the state governments. But state governments have limitations to how much they can borrow, and that limitation is also dependent on how much the center is willing to indulge them, because center can lend them money directly, but the center can also help by giving guarantees, by standing guarantees for the state. So the state can raise loans from multilateral institutions, World Bank, for example, JICA, the Japanese agency. The white paper says that on 31st March 2019, the state's debt was 3,75,000 crores. Today, it's 9,74,000 crores. And then there are some more details. I will not clutter your mind by going into those figures, but basically, the white paper claims that the state has outstanding dues of 1,35,224 crores. That's a lot. That's almost at this point about 70% of the state's revenues. Those are its outstanding dues, of which 1,13,244 crores is outstanding dues to vendors and schemes, maybe yojanas, and outstanding dues to employees. State government's own employees are 21,980 crores. I told you that while the state government may have improved its schools, there was already stress building up with school teachers and school staff's salaries. This has also led to big litigation against the state government. So I will not read out the entire data for you, but if you see basically 5,615 contempt cases were filed, in many of which the courts have given decrees against the state. These amount to 1,761 crores. Overall, 24,988 cases have been filed against the state government, and 3,542 crores are to be paid as per the court orders or decrees already given. But I would like to believe that the data can't be fixed because data is from published documentation. This shows that while in their times about 60% of the government's debt actually went towards capital expenditure, in these 5 years, while the debt went up, only about 22.5% of it went towards capital expenditure. The rest was used either in the government's own expenses or in giveaways. And all of these leads to see what I would see as almost the final chart in this 34-page presentation. See the vicious cycle of debt trap. You have decrease in capital expenditure. It's a cycle, you can begin anywhere. I will begin with the decrease in capital expenditure. Because of that, there is no productive investments. Because of this, you have reduced revenues, higher taxes, and more borrowings. Because of which you have fund diversion and you have to mortgage your properties, because of which you have high debt servicing, which further leads to decrease in capital expenditure. That's a vicious cycle. With this vicious cycle chart, you also see comparison on spending under various heads and also other key economic data, including per capita debt, inflation, etc., etc. This is where we are getting into the area of claims and counterclaims. Now, before I let you go, in the finance minister's budget in New Delhi, in the Union Finance Minister's budget, there was a lot of talk about what will be done for Andhra Pradesh, and it drew criticism that too much was being given away to Andhra Pradesh, like minimum support price. Somebody used that expression, minimum support price, smart line, right? Because the support of TDP is crucial for the survival of the NDA coalition. However, in fairness to Andhra Pradesh and its people, I would like to point out that in the Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act of 2014, which was the basis of the split of the state into two states, in Schedule 13, about 17 steps that the center was to take to help the new state were listed. So some of what's been promised, in fact, almost all of what's been promised was actually a part of the Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act enacted more than 10 years ago. It's just that not enough was done based on it. If you look at the list is on your screen. You can look at the list. If you look at the list, it will run on your screen. You will see that most of the educational institutions which were to be set up as part of the promises based on division and promises to compensate the new state of Andhra Pradesh, most of those educational institutions have come up. However, a lot of what had to be done with infrastructure, particularly with the new capital, has not yet been done. In fact, if you read this act, very early on, it says the center will set up a committee which will give a report within 6 months on where to build a new capital for Andhra Pradesh. It also says this 13th schedule also tells you that center is committed to providing money for building a new high court, a new assembly hall, and a lot of the infrastructure of governance which goes into any full-fledged state. So some of these promises in the budget, in fact, all of the promises in the budget directed at Andhra Pradesh are really not any special favors. These were committed in the Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act. In fact, when I was reading it, just out of curiosity, because Bihar is the other state in question, I also went back to the Bihar Reorganization Act of 2000. That was under the Vajpayee government. And I was quite astounded to notice that that act has no such promises of compensating Bihar in any way for its loss of its premier revenue generating region, which is the mineral bearing zone of Jharkhand.